Hello everyone, I'm AndyDavo and welcome to the final race guide for the original 12 teams that were released as part of Blood Bowl 3. Today's video is going to be focusing on Old World Alliance, and in this video I'm going to be looking at a bunch of different things. I'm going to start off, I'm going to introduce all the different players to you, of which there are an awful lot today. Well, then we're going to talk about level ups and the best ways to build those players. After that, I'm going to give you some initial starting rosters so you know what to start with. Then I'm going to talk to you about some general strategy advice, including offensive and defensive setups. And then finally, I'm going to close it out with some inducements and what to pick and what to avoid. Old World Alliance are a new team in Blood Bowl 3 that didn't exist previously in Blood Bowl 2. And I guess the best way to describe them is a bit of a mashup between humans and dwarves, really, with a couple of halflings thrown in. They do have some interesting characteristics. A lot of loner on the dwarves means that they are slightly unreliable. They've got a choice of big guys, a little bit like Chaos Renegades, and they rely an awful lot on human linemen as the filler to get things done. So with that in mind, let's kind of look at the team and see what possible level ups and players we've got to choose from. Right, I thought I'd start in this screen for the this video because you can see here we've got so many different options. It might even feel a little bit overwhelming at first. And one of the things we can see is there's an awful lot of one of ones. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 one of ones to pick from. So do we want them? Do we not want them? The first one I'm going to talk about is the choice of big guy. We have the choice between a treeman or an ogre, both of which are standard players on other rosters. So if you've watched the other guide videos, you'll know all about them. And I really think this is a bit of a personal preference in terms of which one you go for. The treeman here, which you can see on the stat card on the far left, has standard treeman stuff. It's 120k, it's strength 6, it's really slow at movement 2, but it's armor value 11. So what you're getting out of this player, broadly, is a little bit of a tank. It will sit there, it will take a lot of damage, or it'll tie up a few players. And if you want to play a playstyle that will tie up several players, that's great. It's also got strong arms, so if you want to throw the halfling, that makes it really good. So these two players have some synergy and are worth considering. Over here, we've got the ogre. Now, the ogre probably is more akin to slightly more mobile styles of play. If we notice on the player card, we've got movement 5, which is the MA5 stat. It's strength 5, so it's a little bit weaker. Standard strength for a big guy, really. Agility 4+, passing 5+, and AV 10+. So you're trading out strength for increased mobility. You're trading out some armor as well. They're both really good big guys, and I don't think there's a great deal to pick from it. Just decide which way you want to play. Do you want the little tank unit that sits there, doesn't do much, or do you want something a little bit more mobile so that let you play a bit more of a progressive running game? Me personally, I think that the treeman slightly edges it, but I really think it's close, and I think you'll see rosters from me that include both. I don't let the money cost really sway you either way. Now, with that in mind, let's go and look at the players other than those two big guys. So first of all, I'm going to cover the dwarves. We've got a dwarf blitzer, a dwarf blocker, a dwarf runner, and a dwarf slayer. So we'll add one blitzer, two blockers, one runner. I have to double check. One runner, and then one troll slayer. The blitzer is indeed a dwarf blitzer from a dwarf team, and the only difference really on this player is the fact that it comes with loner, as do all the dwarves. So it is pretty good. It's got block, it's got great skill access, it's got thick skull, it's not very fast as normal dwarves aren't, and it's also got the armor value 10+. So it's a great little nuggety tank unit. It's a real shame you can only have one of them, but the problem is it's got loner 3+, and that is a real problem, because anytime you're trying to do your turn, you've got to consider that at some point you might roll double skulls, and oh dear, now that's a problem. You might not be able to re-roll it, and you might turn over. It also means that something that dwarves are kind of famous for, which is one dice blocking, it's really bad at these, because now, if you roll a skull, which is going to happen 1 in 6, are you going to throw a re-roll at that? So we need to try and take away the loner problem, and one of the best skills to do that is this skill here, Pro. So I would advise that people, if they are going to run this player, that they do deviate straight away into guard, because it's a brilliant skill, absolutely amazing. You can look at Mighty Blow, but I would wait a moment, and I would advise that actually you take Pro very early on, because Pro allows you to re-roll any individual dice. So if you can Pro the skull if you're throwing on one dice block, and if you fail the re-roll, you can always Pro that. So it makes the player a lot more reliable, which inherently is the thing we're trying to fix. So from a player point of view, You want to use these guys as infrequently as possible from a dice point of view. So full level ups, guard because it's so good. Even taking this before pro. Then I would step back into the primary tree, and I would take pro. At that point, we can jump back into the strength tree, and I think the next two skills I would be looking at are Mighty Blow and Stand Firm. Possibly even Stand Firm first, because that means that player's just guard Stand Firm. You go and throw it against someone, and just say, you're waiting there while we go and play proper Blood Bowl elsewhere. So do look at this sort of player and think, yeah, guard Stand Firm. He's not a blitzer. He is a roadblock. So don't let the name fool you here. You're not looking to blitz with him repeatedly because of the Loner 3+. Next, I'm going to look at Old World Dwarf blockers. The Dwarf blockers here, we're allowed 2 of these if we want them. And they are completely different to anything you might have seen before. So although they start off, they look like a normal Longbeard, movement 4, strength 3, edge 4+, passing 5+, terrible, and AV 10+, right? Really slow, really well armored, average strength, fine. And they've got some interesting skills. We've got armbar, so if your opponent fails a dodge getting away from you, they get Mighty Blow applied to that injury effectively. They've got Brawler, which means that on a block action that's not a blitz, you can re-roll a both down. But what they don't have block, so they're inherently unreliable, and they don't have tackle, so causing people to dodge away and fail is a little bit less likely. But again, they come with Loner. What a bizarre choice of a player. It's what you could have said Dwarf Longbeards could have been without Loner, and they would have been an interesting player, and you could have made Dwarves interesting for the first time in a while. And as such, we've got this really strange player that I don't really think is worth taking, if I'm honest. Even at 75k, I just don't think I would avoid it. It doesn't have block. You're not going to be taking any other skills. It's too unreliable. The only time you would want to take this player is if you wanted 2 AV10 players to sit aside your tree and just tank hits on the front line. That's it. Maybe there's a case for that at higher team value. I struggle to see it though. Now, from a level up's perspective, if you are going to take this player, then the very first skill that you need to take is not kick, is block. Block is a great first skill. It means that you're inherently fixing the unreliability problem. After that, you shouldn't be blocking with it lots. So I would take guard, I would take stand firm, and then I would dip into pro again, and then consider Mighty Blow if you really are somehow putting loads of star player points on this player. Other than that, stop, don't do anything else, and call it a day. From a randoming point of view, no, I would avoid those altogether because you specifically want block, and that's that. And in this tree here, you could consider randoming, I suppose, because we've already got 3 skills. We can't get this skill here, so we've now only got 6, 7 to pick from, and we want 1, 2, 3 of those skills, really, I suppose. But that's the one we specifically want. So if you're feeling fruity, go for it. Take guard. Try and take a random. I caution you against it, though, because if you end up with something you didn't want, that player is just worse. It's not adding value. You need guard, you need block. So over to you. You let me know whether you're going to feel exciting and go for it, or you're going to play it safe and pick properly. Next, we got the Dwarf Runner. The Dwarf Runner is someone I put quite a bit of research into before trying to give you advice on this team, because normally on a Dwarf team, Dwarf Runner is like, yep, I'll always pick one of those, definitely going to take it, think they're great. We're only allowed 1, but again, it's got Loner. It's just inherently unreliable at doing anything constructive. It doesn't have block, and it's got sure hands. Movement 6, not particularly fast. Strength 3, edge 3, yeah, it's a standard Dwarf Runner. But annoyingly, it's got this horrible Loner skill here. Now, I don't know what you want to do with this player, other than if you're going to take one, we can take block. But I'm just going to dip out of talking about level ups, and we're going to look at something else. So the Dwarf Runner here, 6, 3, 3, 4+, 9+. Let's look at the Human Thrower, 6, 3, 3, 9+. That looks remarkably similar. Dwarf Runner, 85k. Human Thrower, 80k. Step into the thrower. It's got pass. It's got sure hands. So which one do you want to play with? Do you want to play with an 85k player with a random Loner skill? Or do you want to have Animosity, won't pass to a Dwarf or a Halfling? Yeah. It's this one. It's this one all day long. So for me, the Dwarf Runner doesn't do anything on a Dwarf team other than fill a positional slot that you don't want, you don't need, and I would strongly avoid. So don't take this player. It's a value trap. And it's not even a good lineman because it's 85k and your standard lineman down here at 50k. So, nah, it's no good. So avoid it. And therefore, not really going to talk about the levels on it because just don't take it. Okay, the last one of the Dwarves is the Troll Slayer. Looks cool. It's movement 5, it's strength 3, it's edge 4+, and armor value 9+, so it's exactly the same as a standard Troll Slayer, except again, it's got this annoying loner skill on it. From a balance perspective, I can kind of appreciate why you might have chose to put Games Workshop put loner on these players, because otherwise people might say humans but better. They just make no sense. From a lore perspective, humans and dwarves got on really well, so I don't really follow that either. And I think you need to avoid, again, this player, if you're going to take it, okay, but it just doesn't have the same first, second, third action on your turn sequencing that you might want from a normal Troll Slayer, despite it having some cool skills and some useful skills. I'm loath to recommend this player, but if you're going to do it, same standard stuff, except this time I think you will probably want to start with Mighty Blow, because if you're going to take it, you're going to use it to blitz. So let's take Mighty Blow. We need support skill of Guard. Juggernaut and Stand Firm are also very strong on this player, and in here, again, if you want to try and mitigate its disaster area, then try and take Pro. So those are the skills, and you want to try and work out in what order you want to use it. Are you using it aggressively, in which case you're taking things like Mighty Blow and probably Pro very early on. If you're using it passively, things like Guard and then Stand Firm are the go-to skills. Again, you need to decide how you're going to play that player, therefore what skills are appropriate. From a stats point of view, as with all the dwarves, really don't. And from a randoming point of view, the only time you want to random probably is stepping into the strength tree. And even then, you're doing so at a 50-50 chance of getting something rubbish. Right, now let's step into the human side of this team and see what we've got here. First up, it's a human blitzer. Human blitzer is literally the same as a normal human blitzer. Sadly, we're only allowed one of them. I think from a balancing perspective, Games Workshop could have maybe let us have two, but we haven't. We've only got one. Not sure what he's got in his hand there. If anyone knows what that's called, do let us know in the comment section, because I don't know what it is. Some sort of like corkscrew. Anyway, he's got animosity to dwarf and halflings, so it's fine so long as you play with mostly a human roster. He's got block, and so in terms of how to build him, you're building your dwarves into the blitzer somewhere. Then this guy's probably following a slightly more support role, in which case I'd step into the strength tree and you want to take Guard first. If, however, I've talked you into building them the way I think I would build them, which is I would build this guy as the actual blitzer, then I think you want to take Mighty Blow, despite not having any staff player points, and then you want to take Tackle. I also really like Pro, and at this point I actually like Frenzy, because then we can hit something and make it stay hit. If you do take Frenzy, by extension, consider Juggernaut. They're a great pair of skills, and also you can consider Stand Firm if you don't go the Blitzer route, or the absolute Frenzy route, because any Stand Firm on this team is going to add a lot of value and allow you to control the field. We've also got Break Tackle, which is an interesting pick. We've got Grab, which is an interesting pick, and those sorts of players synergize depending on how you're building your player and your team. Let's look at the Catcher. Catcher is a really interesting player for me, because it's got this interesting mix of both general and agility on a primary skill. And depending on how you play the whole team, my advice for this player is completely different. You might go A or might go B. So A, we'll just build as the standard Catcher. Then let's take things like Sidestep, Sure Feet, and Sprint. Let's really lean into the movement 8 and make it super fast. And let's try and build it as an actual Catcher. If you're going to go those three skills there, then also consider Block as a defensive skill, and probably Fend as well, to really round him out and make him an annoying defensive player. If, however, you want to do something a little bit crazy and a little bit different, then notice that Dirty Player 1 is in this skill tree. So you can take Dirty Player. You can then step into here and we can take Sneaky Git. I think I'd actually open with Sneaky Git and stepping in then into Dirty Player. So Sneaky Git means you can just keep fouling, and Dirty Player then makes you just better at it. He's movement 8. He's going to be able to score. And I think with that in mind, you could potentially actually say here that the first skill I would come into here is I'd random this, because I'm okay with any of those 4 skills there. It gives you a third skill tree, which, while it's not what you might want to do, you can make it work, because you could go defensive, sidestep, block, diving tackle, and guard. On that player is an absolute menace. Jump up's not terrible. It gives you the ability to do stuff. And diving catch, while not in the original triumvirate of skills that you want here, does mean that he's actually slightly reliable at catching the ball, and either enhances your one-turning ability or lets you just actually work as a catcher on a 2+. So I really like the idea of agility, first skill, random. See what you get, build from there. We'll go with that as a catcher. From a characteristic point of view, so long as you avoid the fouling route, I think you could go a characteristic, and movement 9 is amazing on this player and really gives you genuine threat in terms of trying to score a one-turn touchdown, so long as you go with these 3 skills here. I would avoid everything else, though. Perhaps probably an AV role if you're trying to build them into some sort of annoying defensive guard sidestep monster, where you do actually need to be able to take the odd hit. So there's an awful lot of option here, and it's a shame we've only been given 1 to play with, really. I think this team would have been drastically enhanced if we could have had 2 or even 3 catchers. Next, I'm going to cover the thrower. We've already talked a little bit about the fact that this thrower is actually just a flat better. It's the best thrower on the team, and it should be the one I think you should include. From a characteristics point of view, first of all, I think it's totally reasonable that your first level up is a characteristic. Movement 7 really enhances both his ability to go fetch the ball and then transport it to wherever you need to. It makes him a very effective runner in his own right. I take agility, just makes you dodge better, makes you pick up better. We could take a pass plus 2+, because then we can skip some of the passing skills. The only skill I think I would avoid really is it AV increase. I just don't think it adds enough to this player where some of the other stats absolutely do. Regardless of how you build this player, I think one of the first skills you should take is block, just from a defensive point of view. They are armor 9+, and the whole team is only strength 3+ with limited guard access. This guy is going to get hit from time to time, and with that in mind, I think you really should think about block. And then after that, we need to look into here. Within here, I think leader is also an absolute must pick early on. We'll cover the reroll cost in just a second, but leader is a really good value skill in here. And if you haven't taken either an agility increase or a pass start increase, then things like accurate and or cannoneer, depending on how you want to throw the ball, absolutely make a lot of sense. On the ball is also very strong if you have it still staying at movement 6, because you can go and fetch the ball at the beginning of the drive. And then if you're going to look at something like trying to throw a teammate or trying to go for a semi-reliable one turn, then look no further than this skill. And I can't believe I'm recommending this one, but Fumblerooski potentially is quite an interesting skill. It would let the thrower pick up the ball, transport it forward, put the ball on the floor, someone else could pick it up and hand it off, and now you've still got your throw teammate action to try and make the Halfling hopeful work. Probably not the most reliable idea, but it could work, and I think you might see a streamer or two try and play around with the Fumblerooski skill in a few months' time. Next, we've got the human lineman, and this player really has to fill many different roles, and unfortunately doesn't have great skill access in terms of its primary skill accesses. So primary skills, we've got block, makes a lot of sense. I like the idea of taking a couple of wrestle players. Whatever you do take a couple of tackle players in here. So block tackle twice, wrestle tackle twice, makes a lot of sense, because that means that you're not leaning on just your one blitzer to do all of the dealing with elf stuff. So bear that in mind. Fend is quite good fun. You certainly could take a frenzy player. And the idea is that this player is going to just form the backbone of the team and fill in for wherever the positionals can't quite get to yet. People will say in the comment section, if I don't talk about this, yeah, but Andy, what about kick? What about kick? And I would say that it depends a lot on what sort of style of game you're going to be playing. So the idea behind kick is that you kick it into a corner and you chase after it, or you try and slow teams down by kicking away. If you're not planning on playing a pressing game, I don't see a great deal of value in kick. If you are going to play a pressing game, then yes, absolutely, this skill is required. So again, how you're going to play this team links in very much with how you should level the player up. Would I take a dirty player? Probably not, unless the catcher is not doing the sneaky get dirty player combo. If you are going to go into the proper catcher, then you do need a dirty player somewhere on the team, and I think this is a great place to start. If that's the case, then you need to step into the agility tree, and you need to take sneaky git on that player. Other than that, once you've got a couple of block players, don't be afraid to try and either random a double skill in here, or just straight out pick guard as a second skill, because you're going to have a lot of issues playing against some of the high strength teams in this game. Chaos, Orcs, Nurgle, Chaos Chosen, because they're just going to flat out outguard you and outbully you. You haven't got the agility to run away, then you won't have any natural strength to fight. So you need to take at least 2 linemen with guard, really, to stand much of a chance of fighting back. Characteristics for this team, no, I don't think there's anything worth picking in here. And from a randoming point of view, the only tree that I would dare random in here, again, is the strength tree. It's really the strongest one if you're going to random. But I would just flat pick guard. If you're going to save up for a secondary skill, do just take guard. Okay, the final player on the team is the Halfling Hopeful. This player we're allowed a couple of. I think it's 2. I don't really see a great deal of advantage of taking them. They don't really do anything other than you potentially might want to try and throw them while they're holding the ball, in which case we're going to be doing that. We need catch, we need sprint, we need sure feet, and we don't really need sidestep. So sprint, sure feet, and catch let us receive the ball and be thrown. At that point, absolutely we're looking for a stat increase as well. Movement 6 is amazing. Movement 7 makes it incredibly likely it's going to work. And also, do look at an agility increase for this player because it helps on the landing, and that makes the whole thing work just a lot better. If you could actually pick stats on this player, I'd take 1 or even 2 movement increases. I'd definitely take an agility increase. I'd take some sure feet, sprint, and catch. That would be an amazing halfling. Very specialist, but very good at scoring one-turn touchdowns. Other than that, stay away from these skill trees. They're too expensive. The player will die, and I don't see a great deal of value in it. I hope that was helpful, and we'll now step into some rosters. Right, as usual, I've got 3 different rosters for you. 2 balanced rosters and something a little bit different. So, jumping into roster number 1, the idea of this roster is twofold. 1, it's to play with dwarves and humans, so actually play Old World Alliance. And 2, it was to try and give you 3 rerolls straight away, because playing with 3 rerolls in this rule set really is a good idea wherever possible. I've got an extra dedicated funds. We have 10k spent left over. And then from the top, we've got a treeman for the old tankiness in the middle. I put the 2 best dwarves. If you're going to take dwarves, these are the 2 you want to take. We've got a troll slayer and we've got a blitzer. I've also put the human blitzer in there. We've got a human thrower, 1 catcher for a bit of mobility. So this is your offensive threat here. And then we've got linemen all the way down to 11. Overall, I think this roster is probably the most balanced, and you can absolutely play it. All you'd need to be doing is mindful that you don't open your turn with the blitzer and the troll slayer very often, and you probably have a fine time with this. Is it powerful? No, not really. Is it okay? Yeah, absolutely. Next, we're going to pile into option number 2. And this one, I tried to remove as much of the unnastiness of the dwarves as possible. I did uprate the tree to an ogre just to demonstrate that you can take either. If you prefer taking the tree, then you absolutely could do that, and you could save yourself 20k, and you could put that into some dedicated fans. Totally reasonable. But what this roster does have is 1 blitzer of each type. So we've got 2 blitzers, 1 dwarf, 1 human. I've still kept the catcher-thrower combo to make sure we've got a proper offense. I've got all these human linemen here. And then I also went and just quickly snuck in 1 little cheeky small one. So we've only got the 1. What would you do with it? Well, I think it's really a bench player rather than anything else. Or bring it on turn 7, turn 8. If they've scored, foul something, and then hopefully it gets kicked out. So it's an okay roster, and you can still flex this around a little bit. Again, you could just get rid of that 12th player and just tip that money into dedicated fans if you want to try and make extra money straight out the gate. So it's okay. And arguably, it's probably slightly more safe to play this roster than it is to play roster 1, because we've only got 1 dwarf blitzer. The reason I put this one in mostly was because I wanted a roster I'd probably play, and then a roster that can contain most of the positionals as rosters 1 and 2. Now, on to roster 3. Roster 3, before we dive into this one, is the only time in all of the guide videos I've included something which I think is, exploit's the wrong word, but you could definitely, you're leveraging advantages and mechanics within the game. Let's describe it that way. So on this particular team, I've gone 1 treeman, we've got 1 thrower, no catches because we're not looking to spend money on anything expensive. All of these linemen here, so you're basically playing with a lineman team, but you've also got 1 halfling hopeful. The whole thing only comes in with 2 rerolls. I went massive dedicated fans because it's important we generate some money, but the whole thing only costs 770 team value. And the reason it only costs 770 team value is because hopefully in a sort of a matchmaking environment or a league environment, you're matched against teams that are 1,000 team value. Now you get 300 TV of inducements, pretty much, or 200 and change. That means we can step into the inducement section, and when we get there, think about this team and think about what inducement team, style players are available, and you might start to see the synergy of where I'm going with this. But yes, I think this team could work, and I think you might even find it appear on ladder a few times. With no other stunty teams around, maybe this comes close. Maybe you could think of these guys as really good stunty players. I don't know. But I like the idea of this. And I was playing around with what could you do. And I wondered if basically a team of all linemen with a star player or two would work. If you want to take it even further than that, get rid of this guy and just buy a lineman. That'll drop yourself lower. That gives you more inducements money. But the idea of putting the treeman in was that gives you one anchor, and then that might let you take in a star player to run around and cause mischief and mayhem while you've got your anchor and you're playing with a load of cannon fodder here. Let's jump into the next section. Right, I'm going to start with offensive formations as usual. And this time, it was important to think about where your players are and what you've got, not just from a starting point of view, but also who's going to hit what and go where. So starting in the back of the field, I've put the thrower in the middle of the field. That's so he can get forwards because he's got to go and fetch the ball first of all. And with that in mind, I wanted to include a couple of sweeper players. So if the ball goes deep, we've got ourselves a screen that can come with that thrower no matter where it goes. So I'm okay with giving up some of the line, so long as I can actually go and try and make safe with the ball with these three players straight away. Next, I've got the catcher just tucked in here with a lineman supporting. It's entirely reasonable at this point. You just try and protect the catcher a little bit by dropping it, or you can stick it here. The reason I think you can get away with sticking it here is against the blitz. Almost nobody's going to be blitzing this dude because they're going to be trying to hitting 16 or 14 to create space to run down that flank. So you can probably get away with 10 being here, and it's okay. Now onto this side, I put 14 over here, and then I've put the Troll Slayer out here. I haven't taken it out as wide to sort of match up on this side, and that's because I don't know what I want to do with this player yet. I might be needing to bring it into the middle so I can threaten the surf on the other side, or he's just there as a bit of an anchor to try and protect this side here so people don't blast through. I've put a lineman on the line of scrimmage, we've got a treeman on the line of scrimmage, and then I want to put both my blitzers on because I've got block. So hopefully I'm picking up a 3 dice block with the tree, and then I've got 2 dice blocks with these guys, and as they develop, that's where all your guard is going to be. Number 12 is a representation of a player that might have block and or guard slightly later on down the line. Now let's go and look at some defensive setups. First of all, I've gone for a width-based setup, so I'll put the tree in the middle, and then I've put the armor 10 plus player, and then a lineman. So we've put the tank, the big tank, and then a spare player who probably got wrestle. Flanking that, we've got 2 linemen here and here, just to protect things. I've put our 2 squidgiest players in the middle. Troll Slayer is great because it can go either left or right. And then behind that, I've put our thrower, which is our superstar. If you do have spare players, I would at this point advise you put the thrower on the bench and you bring on a lineman. And if you're going to do that, then you want to do this as well. So put a lineman here. And this setup will just work. On the wings, we've got 2 linemen here and here. And I've put the catcher on one side and I've put the blitzer on the other, just to give a bit more attacking width on either side. I think this setup is not quite a defend 2 or 3 turn setup. It's more about, I'm going to go and press our opponent and see what happens. And I want the ability to go and press on a short kick, either left or right. Overall, I think it's a reasonably balanced setup. If you were defending a 2 or a 3 turn, just pick up everything from these 2 players backwards and just put the whole thing at about halfway here, depending on the speed of your opponent. And just make sure you're setting up either directly in front or you're setting up on where you think they want to start their second turn. I've included a chevron setup, mostly for an anti-2 turn, and also just because I think chevrons are a great setup overall. As usual, we put the tree on the line of scrimmage. I've flanked it with some linemen this time, and I could have easily put the blitzer on there. If you think that you need the armor value, then by all means put that on there instead of a lineman. And the downside of this setup, the thing I couldn't really work out how to avoid, was I ended up putting a Troll Slayer front and center. And if I was an opponent, I'd be looking at that player and thinking about possibly blitzing it. I have protected our thrower and our catcher as the 2 innermost players, and that's probably the most important thing. Again, if you've got substitutes, maybe you take these players off, any of these 3 players really, and you bring on linemen in place. And then I have put the final blitzer out here on the wing. It's an okay setup. It's a bit difficult to make a balanced setup with Old World Alliance because what we don't have is an awful lot of different positionals numbering more than one of a particular type. So you're going to get an imbalance just inherently because of the roster. Overall, I think that's it's interesting, and I'm sure that I haven't covered everything. So again, if you've got any thoughts, please leave them in the comment section below. Maybe this guide video becomes a place where people come and look and think about strategies. So I am interested in any thoughts you've got. Now let's go and look at some inducements. Okay, let's talk about inducements. This is the final section of the video, and before I dive in, first of all, I just want to say thank you very much if you've made it this far and watched it all the way through, and an extra special thank you if you've watched all of the guide videos, because it really has made a great difference to the channel, and thank you very much. It's been brilliant watching all the new people pile in and enjoy Blood Bowl for the very first time. Back to the game. So, in terms of inducements here, I think the best things we can possibly pick, I do like the idea of Bloodwiser kegs, because with a mostly armor value 9+ team, you're going to lose players, and therefore bringing them back makes a lot of sense. I'm not a fan, particularly of extra team rerolls, because hopefully you've picked up 2 in leader, or you've gone with 3 anyway. And so we then come into the standard wizard and bribe combo. As usual, the bribe is super duper valuable, and if you spec into sneaky git or dirty player sneaky git, you'll get a lot of value out of this. The chef is terrible unless you're doing something like I'm doing here, which is you're going to pile in at 770 team value and you've got an absolute bonkers amount of money to spend, like 830, then you need to avoid the chef. This is only good once you're into the 700, 800, 900 team value range, and you've got nothing better to spend it on. The rest of this is all broadly filler, and as I've discussed in previous videos, the only time you want to take a biased referee is if you think your opponent is going to be fouling you. From the mercenaries' point of view, unless you specifically want to induce one of the dwarves with guard, I don't really see a point of taking this, unless of course you've lost your big guy, and again you want to induce it with or without a guard skill. But from a big guy perspective, if we look at the star players list, let's just take a moment and admire Griff Overwald. What an absolute beast of a player this is. One of the best 3 in the game, absolutely. And here is the reason I was talking about playing at 770 team value. If you were playing 1,000 team value game, and they were the opponent's 1,000 team value, and you 770, and you turn up and take Griff Overwald, what on earth's your opponent going to do to a movement 7 with sprint and sure feet, i.e. movement 10, strength 4, agility 2+, block, dodge, terror? He's an absolute beast, this man. So, yeah, please just take a moment and admire what you can do with considerable inducements. And therefore, I think that you could look at trying to make the team as cheap as possible and actually get around the fact that Overworld Alliance are not a great team by just putting star players in there. With that in mind, you could also consider Gromidol, slightly cheaper version, nowhere near as good, and does hand out free skills once we've got the skills working for star players. And in his own right, he's pretty good. He's a dwarf blitzer who's got block, he's got mighty blow, and he's got stand firm. So you get some value out of this. As usual, Helmut Wolf occupies the same cost point as a wizard. I think really I'd just take the wizard over Helmut Wolf. And then we've got Carlovan Kill. Look at the 2 costs here. Carlovan Kill and Gromidol are absolutely similar in terms of cost. So your question is, do you want to be mighty blow strength 3ing things with block, or do you want a strength 4 blodge player who is just an absolute beast? I think at the moment with the skills not in the game yet, then Carlovan Kill is better than Gromidol. Once the skills become in part of the game, then I think Gromidol probably actually edges this and is better than Carla. Final couple of players. We'll talk about Mighty Zug. He is strength 5 with block and mighty blow. A very good player to hold the line. Again, coming in at 220 team value. Imagine having sort of like 450 team value because for some reason your team was only 700 and change, and you were scumming 100k of inducements every game. Absolutely possible if you maybe picked up 6 dedicated fans and you were winning your games. Maybe you could play with 2 really good star players. So that's something you could certainly consider, Mighty Zug. And then before we close out the guide, I just wanted to let you know that I do stream on Twitch, and if you do want to watch me play this game, not just talk about it, do come and say hello. I stream every Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday evening from 7 PM UK time, and then on Saturday and Sunday from 5 PM UK time. So, back to the game, talking about Morg. He's an absolute monster. He should be tuned down, but if you've got the ability to take him, then think about 380 team value, and what that buys you is a movement 6, which is pretty good, strength 6, which is absolutely legendary, agility 3+, he scored me a touchdown already in Blood Bowl 3, he's got passing 4+, so he can lob a goblin, his armor value 11+, so he just doesn't die and doesn't leave the field, and then he's got block, and really he's got this, mighty blow +2, I've made a real fuss of it over the last week or two. It is that good, you do need to take it, he is amazing. And while he's in the game at Mighty Blow +2, we need to think about what we're going to do with him. He does also have Throw Teammate as well. So on a pinch, he can stand in for one of your proper big guys and throw that halfling if you absolutely need him to. When we get the skills in the game, he gets better at that as well. So that's the team. I think it's okay. I think it's playable. I don't think it's super powerful. I also think it's quite an interesting team. So while I don't think you're going to be playing into this team or with this team a lot, understanding how it works so when you do encounter it is probably quite important. And with that in mind, thank you very much for watching. I've been AndyDavo, and I'll see you on the pitch.